Hello, I'm Joel Jasper, the Compliance Officer for Morgan White Group and the Agency Manager for MWG Employer Services. MWG Employer Services offers employers of all sizes assistance with their human resources, employee benefits, information systems, and their administration. We developed this series to help employers better understand their responsibilities associated with the employer mandate and reporting requirements under the Affordable Care Act. And there's no way I can include every detail that could impact an employer and all employers in their specific situations. So if you need more information or assistance in complying with the Affordable Care Act or any other issues associated with human resources, please give us a call at 877-759-5765 or visit our website at mwgemployerservices.com. So let's take a look at why employers must report, which employers are required to report, and when reporting is due under the Affordable Care Act. So why are employers having to report? Let's start with first the individual mandate. Because the individual mandate required everyone and all U.S. citizens to have insurance beginning January 1, 2014. Now, there were several ways in which, under the Affordable Care Act, they were expecting people to have this insurance. Now, in order for them to obtain and own or have their own insurance policies, the Affordable Care Act looked at several ways in which they would get this insurance. Some would qualify for Medicare or Medicaid, and others would obtain insurance through their employers. But for those who couldn't get the insurance through their employer or Medicare or Medicaid, they would be able to obtain it through the private market or through individual health insurance exchanges that are set up by states or the federal government. The individual mandate was put into play to overcome a problem in the insurance industry called adverse selection. Adverse selection is a term that basically could be described as trying to insure a burning house. You can't turn around and go buy insurance when you get sick, have it pay for your illness or injury or whatever it may be, and then drop the insurance and sit around and wait till the next injury or illness comes up. Now, the insurance industry had protected themselves against this type of adverse selection through pre-existing conditions. Pre-existing conditions under the Health Insurance Portability and Accountability Act of 1997 were actually limited to just 12 months. Now, they also provided for as long as someone was maintaining their coverage, i.e. between different plans, and didn't have a break in coverage of more than 63 days, they could pick up on their new plan with no pre-existing conditions. But under the Affordable Care Act, they wanted to do away with pre-existing conditions altogether. Well, the only way to do that is to require everyone to maintain insurance all the time. All right, well, there's some citizens out there who just can't afford the insurance. And for those low-income citizens, they set up the individual subsidies to help them pay for their insurance on a monthly basis. An individual had to be making, or their household income had to be between 133 and 400% of the federal poverty level. And they couldn't be eligible for other coverage, whether it be through an employer or Medicare or Medicaid. And that coverage had to be affordable to that individual. But how would the exchange know if an individual went to the exchange to get their coverage and their subsidy? How would the exchange know whether or not that individual was offered coverage through their employer and whether or not that coverage was affordable? Well, the only way to do that would be for an employer to report that information through the IRS Department of Labor in order for it to be available through HHS and the exchanges. So you've probably seen in the news over the last few months the numerous congressional hearings concerning the eligibility verifications for the subsidies. And what they're arguing about is this subsidy eligibility verification, which is in the law, but the problem is they don't have any way to verify these individuals as being eligible for the subsidies. Matter of fact, Speaker Boehner's lawsuit against the Obama administration is directly derived from the fact that in July of 2013, he postponed the employer mandate and the reporting requirements for a year. So therefore, we have individuals out there beginning January of 14 receiving subsidies who may or may not be eligible for those subsidies and no way to verify that those tax dollars are being paid out. So who has to report and when? Well, the simple answer is all applicable large employers. Now, of course, it's a little bit more complicated than that. You've probably heard the term ALEs, So an ALE is an applicable large employer, and that's an employer who averaged 50 or more full-time or full-time equivalent employees in the previous calendar year. So your requirement to report or offer coverage in 15 depends on how many employees you had in 14, and this will continue on year after year. It's just like the W-2s. As a matter of fact, you'll probably be handing these reports out to the employee right along with their W-2. And just like you report to the IRS all your W-2 information, well, you're going to report all of this information as well. Those reports are due to the IRS by February 28th if you're filing paper, or March 31st if you're filing electronically. Employers with 250 or more returns must file electronically. They don't have an option. So this brings us to, we know who's supposed to report and we know when they're supposed to report, but just how do you actually calculate the employer size in order to determine whether or not you're subject to it? And the first question I ask employers is how many W-2s did you issue last year? And the reason I ask this question is if you didn't issue more than 50 W-2s, then there's no reason to even worry about this because there's no flag to the IRS. So if you think about it, an employer who issued 50 or more W-2s in the previous calendar year, the IRS and the Department of Labor are going to be looking for a report from you because they have no way of knowing how many hours were actually worked by all 50 employees. So how could an employer not be subject to the reporting requirements but yet have more than 50 W-2s that were issued? Well, it comes into the calculations of how the count is done. So in order to get the count, you have to first take all of your full-time employees, those employees who are exempt or salaried, and the hourly employees that are working 120 hours or more a month. And it's quite possible that an employee could work 120 hours or more one month and less than 120 hours the next month. So you have to look at it pretty much on a monthly basis and not necessarily look at an employee by name, but employee X worked more than 120 hours, take them out and add them to the calculation. I know this is kind of complicated, but let's just say you've got 2 employees working 15 hours a week over a 4-week period. Well, 2 employees working 15 hours, that's going to add up to be 30 hours a week, 4 weeks, 120 hours. That's equal to 1 employee. All right, so that would be added to your full-time employees to get a total number for that month. You add up all of those months, of course, across the year, all right, and then you divide by 12. Whatever that average is, if it's less than 50, then you're not subject to the reporting requirements for the following year or the employer mandate. If it's 50 or more, you are subject to the reporting requirements. Now, for 2014, there is a transition relief, meaning that if you in 2014 are doing the calculations to find out whether or not you're required to report for 2015, you can just for 14 only take any 6 consecutive month period and use that for your calculation rather than using the whole year. So it's possible to take your calculations from January through the month of June and use that, or maybe use April through September, or maybe July through December, or any other 6 consecutive months. You can't pick and choose individual months throughout that year. There is a seasonal worker exception. So for employers who have seasonal workers that come on and they only exceed the 50 threshold inside of 120 days, that employer would not be subject to the requirement. But once again, documenting this information and having it available, because if you issued more than 50 W-2s, I can almost imagine you're going to get a letter from the IRS requesting your reporting if you don't actually submit the report. So it's important to have that documented so you're ready to respond to that letter if you get it from the IRS. So I hope this information was helpful in understanding why employers must report, which employers are required to report, and when their reports are due. And if you'd like to find out more about MWG Employer Services, the content I talked about, or the many other ways we might can help you with the management of your employees, please contact us at 877-759-5765 or check out our website at mwgemployerservices.com.